Hello everyone and welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. Today is Monday, so this is going to be the top 5 performers from each position from week 2 video. In this video, if you guys aren't familiar with it, I go by each position, talk about the top 5 performers, kind of why they performed the way they did, if it's repeatable. I mentioned some other notable performances on the week. And then all this is going to be 6-point per passing touchdowns for quarterbacks and then PPR scoring for the other positions, so running back, wide receiver, and tight end. Hopefully you guys all enjoy, and please keep in mind, these are the top 5 before the Monday Night Football game, since I am recording before the Monday Night Football game, of course. So at the quarterback position, we got Tom Brady, 276 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and chipped in with 6 rushing yards as well, 39.64 points on the week. It's Tom Brady. We don't have to say too much here. And if you were one of those people that was kind of hoping Tom Brady was going to kind of fall off a cliff at, age 44, 45, it really hasn't happened. Probably not going to happen. And he looks like he's on a mission once again this season. Then second is Kyler Murray, 400 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 31 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown as well, 39.1 points. So Kyler Murray has been right at the tip of the top so far this season. The only thing that's a little bit different for him is hasn't had quite as many rushing yards, but still chucking the ball pretty good. Got a good complement of weapons there in Arizona now. Then third is Lamar Jackson. Not the greatest passing day last night. 239 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. He did have 107 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, so he ended up with 34.26 fantasy points overall. Lamar Jackson's a guy that is going to be either in the top 5 or real close to it pretty much on every single week, given his rushing upside. Then one of the surprises of this week was Daniel Jones on Thursday Night Football. 249 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions, 95 rushing yards. Daniel Jones is pretty mobile. They've been using him a lot in this RPO action so far this season. He had a rushing touchdown as well. He could have had 2 rushing touchdowns. He could have had 2 passing touchdowns if Darius Slayton didn't drop the ball too. So it was a pretty good week for him overall, 31.46 points. We'll have to see if this continues going forward, but definitely somebody we'll probably have to mention on waivers tomorrow. And it was important to note that offensive line for the Giants really played well against the Washington football team's front 4. So that's really something that's going to help Daniel Jones if that can continue. Then number 5 is Kirk Cousins. Had a great first half, honestly. Didn't really do too much in the second half. He had 244 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. And oddly enough, 35 rushing yards. So if you were one of the few people probably that bet the over on the rushing yards for Kirk Cousins, you did pretty well this weekend, since 35 is a lot more than he usually averages. But 31.26 fantasy points on the week, pretty solid contributor. If he's in a good matchup, if he's in games that are going to end up being shootouts, Kirk Cousins is usually a pretty fine play. Then a couple other notable performances, a couple of guys that, people probably weren't pretty high on going into the season. Derek Carr, he's looked great through 2 weeks so far. They haven't had a running game, so he's had to throw the ball a little bit more, but he played very well against a tough Pittsburgh defense. And then Teddy Bridgewater, the cake matchup against Jacksonville Jaguars, he had a nice day overall. Then we get moved over to running back. We got Derrick Henry. King Henry's back, 35 carries, 182 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 6 receptions, which I believe is a career high for him, with 55 yards in the receiving department. 47.7 fantasy points, pretty much double what anybody else did this week at the running back position. So hopefully if you're someone who drafted Derrick Henry, you didn't overreact after week 1 and trade him off, because this is the performances, the upside that you have with a guy like Derrick Henry. You're going to ride the wave. Some games that's not going to be there, but other games he's just going to win you the week. Then second is Christian McCaffrey, showing once again why he was the first running back drafted in pretty much almost every draft. 24 carries, 72 yards, 1 touchdown. So not the greatest day on the ground. Still solid. 5 receptions, 65 yards. So this is kind of like a little bit of a lackluster game for Christian McCaffrey it's a really good game for anybody else, but 24.7 fantasy points. We haven't even seen his full upside yet, and he's still getting 24, 27 points in PPR scoring. So look out when he really has that big week. Third on this list, and depending on what type of your league, he might not have running back eligibility. He should, because he played running back the last couple of years too as well, but he still might be at wide receiver. Still would have finished, I believe, as a top 5 wide receiver on the week too. was Cordero Patterson for the Atlanta Falcons. 7 carries, 11 yards, 1 rushing touchdown. He had 5 receptions for 58 yards and a receiving touchdown as well. So those 2 touchdowns really boosted him up this week. 23.9 fantasy points overall. We'll see if this is a trend that continues. I know they have Mike Davis there, but they've been using Cordero Patterson. Wayne Gallman's been inactive 2 straight weeks, but he did sign with the team right before the season, so we'll see if he's active in week 3 or not. Can't really say too much here about this. This one could be a fluke, or it could be a little bit of something to come in the future. Then number 4 is Tony Pollard, and I know everybody's freaking out about this one. Oh, Tony Pollard outplayed Zeke and whatever. He had a couple long runs, looked pretty good there. Zeke's still going to be a factor. Don't be selling Zeke right now at this point in time. He had a solid week as well. He almost made the other notable performances as well, just because it was a nice bounce back week for him overall. But Tony Pollard, 13 carries, 109 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 receptions, and 31 yards, 23 points overall. Don't expect this from him every week. There's going to be games that he has nice games. There's going to be weeks like that. If Ezekiel Elliott actually ends up missing, then he has a ton of value. But, probably a guy that you're more of a bench stash at this point in time, a high-value handcuff. Then we have Austin Eckler kind of returning to form. 0 targets in week 1. Everybody was freaking out about it. I reminded a lot of people, too, that Austin Eckler only had 1 target week 1 last season, so I wasn't really concerned about it. 9 carries for 54 yards, 9 receptions for 61 yards. This is the value of PPR format with those 9 receptions. Ends up with 22.5 points. So a couple other notable performances that we did have. J.D. McKissick, who everybody kind of hates because everybody wants Antonio Gibson to have this major breakout season. But with that being said, McKissick still had a very solid game overall. Devin Singletary looked pretty good, had a long run and a touchdown. Zach Moss's counterpart ended up with 2 touchdowns as well after being inactive week 1. Dalvin Cook over 130 yards, pretty solid there. Just didn't score a touchdown. Otherwise, he would have made the top 5 list. And then Chris Carson with 2 touchdowns as well. Next up, we got the wide receivers, and it is highlighted by Mr. Cooper Kupp. Very strong start to the season. Good chemistry with Matthew Stafford so far. 11 targets, 9 receptions, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also chipped in with a carry, but he lost yardage on that, so that actually hurt his fantasy performance overall. Ended up with 36.8 fantasy points. If he's going to keep up anything like he's doing right now, this guy's going to be a top 10 wide receiver on the year. I had a lot of confidence going him into the year. He was my wide receiver 14 on the season for my pre-draft rankings. So this is something that I thought could happen, and just the way they're using him a lot more around the field than just kind of that slot role. So that's definitely something that's interesting for him overall. Tyler Lockett, a solid week again. For all the people out there that said Tyler Lockett's kind of like a roller coaster, not super consistent. So far this season, he's been relatively consistent. 11 targets, 8 receptions, 178 yards, and a touchdown. 31.8 fantasy points, so look for him to keep it up so far in the season. Hopefully, they don't have that massive drop in their offense like they have done in recent years where they focus on running the football. Russell Wilson's not quite as effective, but that's a whole video for another day. Then we got Terry McLaurin, who had a very nice Thursday night football game. 14 targets, 11 receptions, 107 yards, and a touchdown. 27.7 fantasy points. So that's very impressive, especially considering he was going against a very good corner in James Bradbury most of the night. So Terry McLaurin is a very, very talented wide receiver. Don't need to say too much more about him there. Then a nice bounce back candidate from week 1 was Cortland Sutton. Obviously, Jerry Jeudy's out. He saw 12 targets in this game, 9 receptions, and 159 yards, 24.9 fantasy points. I do believe I saw a statistic come out yesterday that says he leads the league in air yards, so that's definitely something that's going to help him out throughout the season if that trend can continue. Then at wide receiver 5, we have Mike Evans, 9 targets, 5 receptions, 75 yards, 2 touchdowns, 24.5 fantasy points. This just shows you that Tampa Bay wide receivers, there's probably going to be 2 of them that are relevant on any given week. Some weeks it's going to be Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Some weeks it's going to be Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown, and so on and so forth. So there's going to be weeks where Mike Evans is not as relevant like the first week of the season, but he's just a guy you have to roll out there every week because you have this type of upside on any given game. A couple other notable performances that we did see. Rondale Moore looked great, even though he only played about half the snaps. Marquise Brown looked very good last night on Sunday Night Football. His ankle really didn't look like it was bothering him too much. Brandon Cooks, another solid day. Despite losing Tyrod Taylor at halftime, Freddie Swain, nice day for him overall. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 95 yards, and 1 touchdown. He was one of my favorite DFS sleepers of the week, so it was nice to see him pay off. And then Michael Pittman Jr., who had a solid day against the Los Angeles Rams, over 100 yards. And I assume Jalen Ramsey was probably on him most of the time, so that is pretty impressive overall. I haven't had a chance to look into the stats to see how often they lined up against each other yet. But if that was not the case, I'll be sure to let you guys know, though. Then last but not least, we got the tight end position, and this essentially just shows how vital the tight end position is week to week. So we got Travis Kelce at the top, 8 targets, 7 receptions, 109 yards, 1 touchdown. He had 23.9 fantasy points overall. It's Travis Kelce. He's going to be near the top 5 or at the top of the top 5 every single week. Then we got Rob Gronkowski, solid game once again, 5 targets, 4 receptions, 39 yards, 2 touchdowns, 19.9 fantasy points. Honestly, Rob Gronkowski is not going to be able to keep up this touchdown pace, but, until he shows otherwise, we're going to keep rolling him out in our lineups because there is that high upside, especially at the tight end position that has a lot of volatility to it so far, and that touchdown scoring upside is very nice on a week-to-week basis. And number 3 is Max Williams, and I could not believe that I cannot believe this actually happened because, going into the season, Cardinals tight ends weren't targeted very highly last year. Their tight end group actually got worse without Dan Arnold. And so Max Williams, kind of second round bust for a long time, had 7 targets, 7 receptions, 94 yards. I don't think he had a single target week 1, so this was a major surprise. Probably a fluky performance, probably not going to happen again, but he did play a lot of snaps week 1. Haven't had a chance to look at the snap count for week 2, but we'll just have to see how this trend continues. Maybe somebody that's worth picking up on waivers down the road. With that being said, he did end up with 16.4 fantasy points. And then number 4 was Jack Doyle, and I did not see this coming either. I guess you could make the case that they were playing against the Rams. They were throwing the ball a ton. The Rams linebackers aren't very good in coverage, so that definitely helped him out. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 64 yards, 13.4 fantasy points. Most weeks this does not make the top 5 at the tight end position, but it just shows how volatile that tight end position is. And it looks like he must have had a 2-point conversion converted as well, just based on his stats there with the 5 receptions and 64 yards would have been 11.4 points. So that's what I'm guessing. I didn't have a chance to go back and look at that, though. Then last but not least, we have Noah Fant, 6 targets, 4 receptions, 33 yards, and 1 touchdown. 13.3 fantasy points. Pretty solid performance for him. I think he's somebody that you're going to be able to roll out in your lineup, in your tight end spot more often than not, and he's going to pay off for you, which is something that's really valuable this season, especially given the volatility of the tight end position. Then for other notable performances, I just put Kyle Pitts down there. He had like 5 catches for 73 yards. A little bit of a bounce back week. Nice to see him get used a little bit more often than week 1 and have a little bit more production. Do I think it's what you need out of Kyle Pitts where you drafted him? Probably not, but it's nice to see, that kind of little upswing after week 1. But with that being said, these are the top 5 performers at each position for week 2. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. If you think I missed anyone in the notable performances, just leave it down in the comments below. Once again, this video was recorded before the Monday Night Football game, so there is no Monday Night Football players in this. But with that being said, that's pretty much all I have for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel, please consider subscribing. Definitely would appreciate it. It helps to build the community that we're trying to build here at Coach Craig Sports, which is one that's truly for you, the viewers, helping you with your fantasy football, helping you with your DFS, whether it's NFL or NBA. Covering all the NFL news. There's probably going to be a ton of it this week because there was a lot of injuries, so I'll see if I can sneak that into a couple of these videos as well. Don't want to make these videos too long because I do understand that it takes time out of your day to watch these videos in general. Once we get closer to the 2022 NFL Draft, I'll be sharing my thoughts on some of these prospects going into the 2022 NFL Draft as well. But with that being said, if you are a new or current subscriber and yet to do so, also hit that notification bell down below. It's going to let you know every single time I upload a new video. And then with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. Hopefully you guys all enjoyed. And then last but not least, special little shout out to each and every one of you watching today's video. I truly do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. Definitely means a lot to me, and I hope each and every one of you has a great rest of your day.